The Mauritius campaign is an interesting hybrid of map-based logistical shoving units around a map kind of campaign on the one hand. On the other hand, it's kind of a narrative campaign. We did a little landing over here by St. Pierre and we just kind of figured it out. We knew the British had 600 troops over here on Rodrigues, and they sailed over here and they made it through there was no gauntlet. Like, the British only have 4 ships. They actually have 5-on-5 at this point. You know what I forgot to put down here. The prize ship, the Creole, is now in the possession of the British. They went over here and they did a little raid on St. Pierre and they cut it out. They got a whole bunch of fat loot that's all been deposited at Rodrigues. And as we begin February 1810, see, there we go. We got to figure out what the prevailing wind direction is. Winds are always out of the east here. You have to. I figured it out. The guys, when they want to go up to the Bay of Bombay, which is way up to the northeast, the prevailing winds are east at this latitude. When they leave, they're going to have to sail up to the northwest until they get into the northern hemisphere, and then they can catch trade winds coming back this way. So, if you recall, when we brought the French back from Bombay, they came from this direction, but when they leave, they're going to want to leave in that direction. And the British know that. And one of the things that I didn't really talk about in the last episode, I don't know if I've ever talked about this, but one of the things you have to consider is that the guys that are running these ships aren't stupid. And you may think that you've got a clever plan, but all of your plans could be anticipated by other clever people. And one of the things to be aware of when you're playing this kind of a campaign is that there are only so many options that you have. There's a certain gravity that certain areas have, that they pull forces together. There's a reason Waterloo was fought where it was fought. There's a reason why the Alamo was fought where it was fought. The terrain there funnels forces into a given area. Of course, the Alamo, in that case, it was a big desert, but it was a fort, which had been fought over repeatedly. It wasn't the battle of what we think of as the Alamo was not the only time that there was fighting in that area. It's just a good place to have a battle for a lot of different reasons, not worth going into here, except that when it comes to generalship or admiralship in our case, you can anticipate the most likely couple of options that your opponent is going to take. You can kind of get ahead of them. You can narrow it down from an infinite amount of space. Look at all this ocean that they could be in. Well, I know they're going to Rodrigues, so I know I want to and I know they're coming from this direction, so I know I want to patrol here. I don't have to worry about 360. I can cut that down to just 30 degrees of patrolling. And so there's a gravity, just like a natural force pulling these guys together. And one of the things you can count on is that our French and our British admirals, it's British Admiral Rowley, I can't remember what the French admiral's name is. A smart guy, really clever, wound up getting captured. Both of these guys are under enormous pressure to fix it, get this resolved, get it over with, so that we can free up these resources for the main event, so we can get them back to India, so we can get them involved with shipping, get the British out of here so we can send these fourth-rate ships back up to Bombay where they can start raiding the fat loot ships. The British are under pressure. Hey, take over Mauritius. We need to use this as a staging ground. And at a certain point, now we've been kind of mucking about for, I don't know, almost a year now. We started in 1809. It's February 1810. And something's got to give. We have to go all in at some point. Both admirals are in that position, so we can stop and we can say, hey, hold on here. As the winter turns to spring, what are they going to do? And we know from historical fact, from the historical record, that the British are going to come sailing in here in about 6 or 8 months with a big fleet, and they're going to put this to bed for good. But what if we can save them the trouble? Boy, wouldn't that be a feather in Admiral Rowley's hat? So we're going to mix things up a little bit here. Now, this is last episode. Remember when I drew red and blue spaghetti and a whole bunch of stuff happened, but nothing really interesting happened? Today, we're going to see what happens. And I'm going to have to figure out what the strategies are, and then I think I'm going to turn the camera off. I'm going to go do some numbers, run some numbers, and figure out where those black holes of conflict, where those centers of gravity are that pull the ships together. So we can put together a nice big fat scenario, or maybe a couple of series of scenarios, maybe a little bit more tracking around the ocean to find where those scenarios are. And what that's going to look like is your standard. I have done what we usually do in these situations, taking advice from old William Sylvester, and I've given each force, red and blue, 3 main options for their strategies. And I did that to surprise myself. For the French, they say, look, we can spend another year in Bombay. We're all 6 of these ships are going to make a break for it. They're going to try to get up out of the way. That's pretty boring. And then, we have to figure out what that means. We'll probably send 2 of the British ships up and we'll do some off-screen stuff. That's one option. The second option is, look, just hold position. Okay, you guys are pinning down 6 British ships now. The Creole is just a little sloop. It's not that big a deal. But 5 ships of the line, just keep them here. We don't want them over in the Mediterranean. We want to have our big Battle of the Nile. Was it Battle of the Nile coming up here pretty soon? I don't know, whatever. And the longer they're down here, the less likely they are to participate in that. But the third option, of course, is the French had this notion of attack, always attack. Elan was big. Let's stop hiding out in ports. Everybody get out, and we're going to take the fight to the British. They've been using Rodrigues as their supply point for too long. We're going to go ahead and just get everybody out, and we're going to pick a date, and we're going to attack Rodrigues. Now, I may rewind the clock a little bit, and they may get out of port when the getting's good before the British. Remember, some of these ports were open for a little bit. The blockade was broken as the British got their ships resupplied. And likewise, the British are planning something in January, so we may move these around a little bit too, just to kind of retcon in terms of what the plan is going to be. So maybe the French attack Rodrigues to try and throw the British off. Now, for their part, in the real world, the British tried to do that by launching a huge attack on Mahabur. Didn't go very well. In fact, it went so badly that the British said, all right, we need to really commit to this. Local forces can't handle it. Their main port is down in the southern tip of Africa. So they come up and they basically win the things. And that's probably going to happen to us regardless. But I'm not going to worry about that because I'm having too much fun with the forces that are on the map right now. Now, for their part, the British, same thing, right? They decide, in the real world, they said, we're going to go after, Mahabur. But maybe they go after Port Louis, right? Maybe they decide if we can take Port Louis. Mahabur is a fortress. That port is rough. But if we could take Port Louis, maybe we fight a little land battle here. Maybe we attack from the ocean, from the land side, while the ships come in from the shore side. Maybe we do the same kind of thing, but we start in Port Louis. So there's actually 2 options here. I kind of split them. We'll do 50-50, right? If we do an attack, we'll call this, I'm going to roll the D6, same as always, and we'll call this a 1 and a 2 and a 3, 4, 5, 6. Continue the blockade. This is the boring one. If I get and this is honestly, this is probably what's going to happen, right? If I roll a 2 or a 3 a 3 and a 4 and a 3 and a 4, we're just going to hold position for February. Total snoozeville. But what if the British roll a 5 or a 6? We're going to go full intercept. The British are going to say, you know what? I'm pulling everybody, all the stops. Now the Raisonnable is, actually, they're all just kind of resupplying. They got a week or 2. Maybe these 2 ships, maybe the Creole is gone. We'll have to figure out what's going on with these 2. But otherwise, all 4 of these say, look, I'm not going to blockade these ports anymore. I'm going to go prowl, and that's what this little red circle is. I'm going to go hold position here. They're anticipating that the French are going to roll a 1 or a 2 and try to make it out. So they're just going to let them out. They're going to pull out. They're going to make it like maybe we're going back to Rodrigues to reload. Maybe instead of going back on station, they decide they're just going to go. See the little red circle here? This is the area, like I said earlier, the French are going to be setting sail in this direction. Now, I need to figure out which direction the wind is. That's what the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is. Let's just roll for that real quick. With the result of a 5, the wind is going to be out of this direction. It's going to be, well, is it all east? No, it would have been towards the center of the map. So if I just draw a point right there in the center of the map, it's going to be unchanged from January. So the wind continues to be out of the east southeast. We'll write that down just to make it official. And now we can roll for, so again, the British are going to kind of, as the French come out, they're going to try to intercept them up here. And I don't know what kind of fights we're going to have, but I've got 4 British ships, 5 if we bring the Creole out. And then I've got 2, 4, 5, 6, not the Orient. Now the Orient is a prize ship. So she's going to be headed back to France, and we may just let her go. So it's 5v5. I don't know what the scenarios are, how they're going to develop, but that's why we roll the dice, isn't it? I rolled the dice, but I forgot to specify which was which, so it didn't really mean anything. That explains the little awkward edit you just saw. I'm going to roll the white die for the French and the black die for the British. Let's see what each side decides to do and how they intersect. The French decide on another year in Bombay, and the British decide to go full intercept. So this is ideal for the ocean-borne scenarios. We are going to have some ships fighting some other ships, and I need to do what I've already done in the past. And it's going to get a little confusing because we're going to have all of our ships kind of prowling in this quadrant here. And we're just going to have to see who runs into who. The French, obviously, are going to try to get through as fast as possible. So we'll say the British, they've gone out. They're up here. The British are patrolling. And the French have to decide, well, how are we going to go? And I guess because they're all starting in a different place, maybe they all start on a different day. So what I'll do is figure out which day of the month. They're all leaving early in February, okay? So the British are all departing on the 1st. And that way they're going to have a 1-day head start. Okay, so if I put a little 1 here, so the British go full intercept on the 1st. We'll just make a note there, okay? I'm going to need to make a photocopy of this to really spell this out. But then I have a question. How long does it take for the Venus to leave? And they're going to leave on the 9th. And what this does for me is it gives me a little bit of a spread for the French. Hey, look, the British are gone. They've given up. The Ceylon will leave on the 7th. The Marche and the Revenant, I'm going to have them both leaving on the 8th. And then the Caroline is going to leave on the 9th as well. So this may lead to some much larger scenarios than I expected. Bear in mind, the Caroline is going to have to come out, and they're going to have to go up this way, and I don't know how far they're going to go. I mean, I could roll some dice again, but I don't want to figure out what the French are doing. I don't want to lay it out entirely until I've set my patrol paths for the British. The other thing I can do to kind of complicate matters is decide, are any of the French, so this is really, if we take a look at this like compass rose, with the wind, let me use, what color would be good for the wind? Let's use green, okay? And a little bit of a ruler here. So I said the wind is going to be in this direction. So there's your wind direction. Now, anytime a ship, and I'm going to draw a perpendicular line. Okay, so anytime a ship's heading is in this direction, anything short of that, just a little bit past due north, they're going to be moving downwind. Which means as the Caroline comes out, right, until they get clear here, this would be where they're going to be sailing upwind. And that's at that, as we talked about last week, basically 3 centimeters a day. And then they're going to blitz out at basically 6 centimeters a day. So they're only going to be in position for 2 days, regardless of how far they go. But that's kind of what I was getting at is I can roll a d6 to find out how far they go before they blitz out. But I really do want to get my British patrols together. And the question is going to be, do we want to go 2 by 2, 1 by 1? And so again, we can let the dice decide what the actual strategy is going to be. Maybe the Boetic and the Sirius are going to be paired up a half a centimeter apart. Remember that your sight lines are only from ship to ship 6 millimeters. That's as far as you can see. We can expand that to a full 12 if we've got a ship here. And it's going to be bigger than that, isn't it? We got to put another 6 over here. Because if we put them just on the horizon from each other, so here's ship A. I can zoom in. I know it's real tiny. Let me just give you a better indication what that looks like. And here's ship B, and they maintain that 6 millimeters of distance. Then you got 6 centimeters on each side, and now you're actually covering 18 millimeters of table space. Right now, ultimately, if we put another ship here and another, so there's your 6, and here's your other 6, and you can only cover 3 centimeters. So if we zoom back out, if we put them in line, they're only going to be covering this much territory, 1, 2, 3, about the size of 2 fingers. And that's not a whole lot of territory to cover. And that's why we want them kind of moving back and forth. But I think maybe in this case, what we'll do to increase our odds of having a 2v1 or maybe a 2v2 fight is we're going to have these guys separated, and we're going to keep them on tracks that are separated by that 6 centimeters. And we'll do the same thing with the leopard and the Meride. Do we bring the raisonnable out as well? I think we do. But I'm going to have to do, I think maybe we just set a patrol path. It's going to get complicated again. I don't want to run into one of these situations. This is ugly. I don't want to get to this. So I need to spend some time. I need to think about this. And we'll be back after these non-commercial messages. We're not monetized because who needs the hassle, huh? Thank you to all of our fine sponsors. Day Job Incorporated, first and foremost among them. I've laid out the British patrol paths, but I want to warn you guys, it looks a little bit wonky because I'm not quite doing it authentically correct. I got a couple of boats here, tumblingdice.co.uk. I got to explain something. When you've got 2 boats, remember, they're separated on our map by 6 millimeters. As they patrol, and they're going to be doing a loop, how you make corners is a little bit wonky because you can't just maintain a consistent distance between them. If I use the ruler between, what would wind up happening is the ship on the outside, let's go ahead and call that the Boatica, and the ship on the inside are traveling very different distances. The Boatica is making a much larger circuit. So the way these ships will actually be making their patrol route, if it's a square, what will happen is they'll pivot. Like this ship will be in the lead and it will pivot to the outside. And so they're actually going to be making squares that are the same size, but sometimes one of them will be on the outside. See how the Sirius is now on the outside? And as they come along and make those corners, then suddenly when you get to the other side, now Boatica is on the outside. What that means is that at the corners, you don't have a nice, clear, consistent width. I've kind of cheated to account for that just a little bit. And when it comes to the width, remember that we're really interested in how far can you see, because they can only see about 3 or I think we said 6 miles from the top of the mast. That's where you see a mast on the horizon. So these aren't great. Hopefully the colors will show up a little bit here. I got 2 patrol paths out here in the open trackless ocean. See, here's St. Brandon. Just a series of reefs. I kind of wish I would have keyed in on that one, but what are you going to do? Just as a landmark for the red are the Boatica and the Sirius, and the orange triangle here, this is the leopard and the Meride. The dark line in the center, that was my starting line, and then I said, okay, I'm going to cheat around the corners. I pulled that in so they can't see quite as far, but I'm going to maintain kind of the interior just to keep things simple. And that's why this outside sight line is bent a little bit wonky, because here at the vertex, if you will, things get a little weird, with the ships like I showed you. It's even worse when you're dealing with triangles, I think. I'm not going to get the boats out here. But basically what I did is I set up a path here for the Boatica and the Sirius, where they spend 1 day going downwind, 1 day going upwind. And just to refresh your memory, wind is out of the east by southeast. So they can go really fast along these 2 lines of their patrol route, and then they're stuck going 3 centimeters, 3 centimeters, 3. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now I'm going to start them here on February 1st to make the math a little easy. I might be cheating a day or 2, but it's fine. Remember, we're really just looking for what are the odds that they bump into a French vessel. Notice that the leopard and the Meride, there's a lot of overlap here, right? They may see each other and catch sight of each other, but because we've got a path for the leopard and Meride where they start here and they go 1 day downwind, and then 2, 3.5 upwind, and then a half in a day downwind, right? They're on a 5-day cycle. So between the 7-day and the 5-day, we're covering a whole lot of ocean here. And each of these vessels now has two chances. As the French come through, they may intercept them here, they may intercept them here, and maybe the French, because remember, the French don't know what these paths are. Now, we do, so we have to account for that. But the French don't know, so there's a very good chance that the French may wind up tracking right along this path. And in retrospect, maybe I should have had one of these going counterclockwise. They're both going clockwise at this point. Counterclockwise might have been better, but I guess, well, wait a minute, can we do that? No, well, let's see. Let's think about this. Maybe we should go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so that we're kind of pinwheeling around. It's too late. They're both going clockwise. That could be a mistake on my part. What are you going to do? Okay, now we have to ask ourselves, how do we ensure that the French are operating independent of our knowledge? And the answer to that is with dice. So what I've done is I've said they're going to sneak out at night, not knowing where the British are. They're going to just basically race out 1 centimeter. That's 50 kilometers. Remember, here's our scale. So 1 centimeter is 50 kilometers. So they're going to race out, and then I did things a little bit different. Caroline leaves like at midnight, and they need to kind of get around the Isle of Mauritius itself to open up their possible routes of escape. Remember, we're trying to get to Bombay, which is in that direction, but you have to sail this direction until you can pick up the prevailing winds going in that direction. So they're going to sail that way for like 3 weeks to catch the westerly winds that will take them back east to India and the Bay of Bombay, where there's a lot of fat prizes sailing around. Okay. So now the question is, well, this is the route that I've taken. So it's dawn on the 7th, 8th, and 9th. That's when all 3 of these ships are taken off. What path are they going to take? Well, I put a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm going to roll off to sea. So all 6 of these ships, rather, we're going to keep the Venus and Orient together. Remember, the Orient is a cargo vessel. The Venus is just trying to escort her far enough away so that she can make the run back to France. So if the Orient can make it off the table, then we have an instance where the Orient is, they're on their own. Maybe they make it to Madagascar. Maybe they don't. Maybe they make it to Africa to unload their cargo. Whatever. The point is, Venus will then continue on to prowl the open seas for prizes. Okay, so each of these ships is going to start on the little blue X, and then the question is, which way do they go? And I like this because it means we may have a scenario with the Venus protecting a cargo ship. We may have a 2v2. We may have the little Caroline here trying to escape from all of these guys. Now, there's one last little wrinkle we can put into effect, and that's that we got the Creole over here. Now, the Raisonnable is resting, refitting, getting retooled up. They're patrolling here to keep Rodriguez safe in case the French were going to come and try to attack Rodriguez. So Raisonnable, they're on defensive. But the Creole, as a little sloop, they're going to add just one more little variable to the exercise. They will be leaving Rodriguez on the 1st, and it's going to take them a day or two to get back into these patrol waters. So I'm going to add one more line, and let's go ahead and use should we use brown? I'm limited by colors. I'd like to use a reddish. I'm going to go ahead and use green for the Creole. Creole is going to, of course, be a sloop that can sail around whip fast and alert these other larger vessels if it encounters one of the French. So before I roll for the French, let me just put a path down for the Creole. And there you have just a little bit more green confusion to sow to our garden of chaos here. I put little numbers, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th. You can see they cruise way up pretty fast, claw their way back upwind. They're kind of just patrolling here, looking to see if they run into anybody. They're going to dog the heels of anybody that comes out, or maybe race over to try to make contact. Now, they know where their friends are located. These are plotted out by the Admiralty. So if the Creole does manage to catch sight of a French ship, they may be able to race over, grab a couple of buddies, and then move to intercept. This could get really complicated. I also put down the dates here on each of the inner tracks. So for the Boatica and Sirius, this is where they're on the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. I only did up to the 13th. I think that'll be okay, because the Caroline is going to start here on the 9th. That's the latest in the Venus and the Orient. And because they're sailing downwind, they're only going to be on this map for 2 or 3 days. It's going to be really quick once things get going. because we know what the dates are, and then again for the leopard and mermaid, it's going to be 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and then you can see like here is it says the 5th and the 10th, the 1st, 6th, and 11th. So that'll make it a little easier when we roll the bones. And let's go ahead and start with the Ceylon. It is the 7th of February. The Ceylon has snuck out. It's dawn. They don't see any British ships, and they say, "Hey, we got a nice, lovely path. The world is our oyster and the ocean its pearl. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's the route they're going to take." So with a result of a 5, the Ceylon will be headed for exit point number 5. The Venus and the Orient, on the other hand, are going to be headed for point number 4, leaving on the 9th. The Marsh and Revenant are going to be leaving for point number 3. Now, because 5 is over here, let's take a, well, let me just finish rolling here for the Caroline here. The Caroline rolls a 2, and so wouldn't you know it, they're all going to be crossing paths. This is pretty great. I need to zoom out so I can show you. The Ceylon is going to be moving towards number 5, and you might notice this big gray splotch. That's an island. So they're going to have to kind of cheat a little bit off to the side. Now, the good news is the perpendicular is like this, so they're going to be making good time pretty much the whole time. We'll go ahead and give them a half a day of, well, we'll give them a half a day of sailing down this way. And I'm not looking at the British at this point. So here's the situation on the 7th. They start here, and we'll give them a half a day. So that's 3 millimeters. And then another half a day due north. And this is where they will wind up on the 8th. Now, I can do this one of two ways. I can plot out the Ceylon's path. Or I can say, okay, it's the 8th, and that means that the Marsh leaves from here, and we know they're headed for point number 3, and they are just going to make a beeline. They're just running straight out for the corner of the paper. So at 58 millimeters, they're going to go kapow, and they're going to wind up here. So on the 8th, they leave here on the morning of the 8th. So we left here on the 7th. That's where we went up. So at the morning of the 8th, they're here. They moved to here on the 9th, and now headed for number 5. The Ceylon is going to be able to move 58 in, oh, where's 5 right there? Okay, so they're going to trace a path that looks a little something like this. Don't worry so much about every little millimeter. Remember that there's a lot of chaos and confusion. Oh, somebody spilled the wind from the sails, a little bit too much. Oh, we're still getting the hang of things. Things are a little complicated. We're just doing kind of an impressionistic thing. But this is where the situation stands on the morning of the 9th. Now on the 8th, so on the 7th, on the 8th, we have a potential sighting right here. I think we need to do this day by day. We have a scenario on the 8th. The nice thing about the distances traveled being about 6 centimeters when you're downwind and 3 when you're upwind is that you can assume there are 12 hours of daylight where you might actually see something. And that means that since both ships are sailing downwind, I know it looks like they're at right angles, but trust me, they're both, the wind is out of this direction. So they're both have the wind at their back. The British are upwind, which is good for them. It means they've got the weather gauge. They're in good position. But back to the timing. In order to figure out exactly where these guys cross paths, I said, well, the 12 hours of sailing, it's, we're approaching the equinox, close enough. That means each one of these little red marks is a half an hour of sailing. So I can start at the end of the day, here at the 8th and the 8th, and count back. Well, here's an hour. And if we go back 2 hours, then we do the same for both ships. And that means somewhere right in here, the British are going to be more to the northwest, and the French are going to be more to the southeast. This does mean that the British aren't going to wind up sailing this route anymore. So the Ceylon may get jumped and may get hammered here, and we'll have to adjust what our patrol path is for the survivors of remember this is the Boetica and the Sirius. So I'm going to stop right now. Oh, by the way, just so we're clear, the Creole is way over here on the 8th. It's just off camera. Just off camera. You could move the camera. There you go. Here's the Creole on the 8th. So as we approach the end of the day, out of the question. There is a chance that we had a scenario here where these paths cross for the British. So we have 4 British vessels, right? You're running into the Caroline or something. That's not going to happen, it looks like, because we're going to have to slow down here. What does our scenario look like? Well, again, it's an intercept scenario. And of course, the Ceylon isn't going to wind up following this path. The Ceylon is just trying to get away from these two vessels. So I'm not entirely sure. But I'm going to pause this video. I'm going to not pause. I'm just going to end it straight up because I have to figure out what happens with this scenario before I figure out so that I can know what the rest of this patrol path looks like. If they are slowed down by a day, see, take a look, man. This is the ninth. This is where the Marsh and Revenant are on the 9th. So the survivors of this fight could very well be delayed just enough. Now, normally, there may have been another scenario here on the 10th as they cross paths somewhere in here. But it may just be the one British ship continuing its route, maybe a day late, so maybe the Marsh Revenant can get by. A little hard to speculate because this is so complicated. And that's what I like about this style of campaigning. It's so complicated, you really can't predict. There's just too many variables at play. I'm going to throw some ships down on the table, and we're going to play this out. And then we'll come back and say, okay, now it's the morning of the 9th when the Caroline and the Venus and the Orient set out. And it looks, you can kind of look, man, Venus and the Orient, they probably got smooth sailing if this gets jammed up. Caroline is going to be headed for right here. They have some threats, but that's more of a cliffhanger. You're going to have to tune in here, not next week, but the following week when we turn our attention back to the campaign map. For right now, we got a tactical fight on our hands with some real implications for the Mauritius campaign. I hope you come back in a week and we'll take a look. Till then, I'm praying for you.